Hi guys.
Hey,
Thank you so much for giving me your time. Big fan of the movie. I'm excited to talk about it a little bit. Congratulations on finally getting it out. I'm excited for the rest of the world to see it. Yeah,
thank you.
I'm Cole,
Yeah,
by the
thank
way,
you for
right
watching.
from
Yeah.
FandomWire. Let me, bam. All right, I'll just get right into it because I have 8 minutes. I don't want to waste your time with
Yeah,
everything.
let's do it.
So, Karan, I was wondering, so specifically your portrayal of Naveen, who is navigating being a gay man in this like traditional Indian family. I can imagine how like that requires a lot of deep emotional engagement. And so I was wondering, how did you prepare for this role and how did you draw from your personal experiences?
Yeah, this role feels like a little bit like I cheated, but I'll just be honest, which is when I read the play originally and then the script, it's this rare thing that sometimes happens with acting where you feel like someone's written it for you, even though they haven't, but you just read it and you go like, oh, I could do this. This feels like sometimes it takes a while to get your mind around some dialogue, but with this, I was like, oh, I've said these things in real life already in a version of them. So that helped. And then the second was, yeah, I came out when I was 19. So when we were making the movie, it was like over a decade after that. So it was old memories, but it was things that I was pulling from my real life and bringing them into it. It was hard because when I was younger, I was a lot like the character, very shy and not expressing my feelings as much. And I had come out of my shell a lot more when we were filming it. But it was kind of fun to like go back to that version of yourself years later when you're in a different place.
Great. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Roshan, I read the director's statement that comes in like that press kit,
Yeah.
and what was I think like a very emotional line that I read was shooting your own dream, which was this gay Indian wedding before it had actually happened. Like, what was that? What was that experience like of filming this?
Yeah, it was really emotional. And I'm actually a pretty blunt, unemotional seeming person, but I really broke open while making the movie. And two things in particular. One was that we shot the Indian wedding at the end between two men, and all of the extras we had ushered into that tent were random uncles and aunties from around British Columbia who certainly had not been briefed on what they were about to witness and represented figuratively and literally the people who I am the most afraid of coming out to. But after we had gathered them in the tent, we asked them after they saw the two men walking in circles around the fire to stand up and throw petals. And I thought, what is going to happen? And I kept looking at their faces as the wedding was happening. And then when I signaled for everybody to stand up and throw flower petals, they did. And watching them all throw it with such actual happiness and joy on their faces, I felt like literally accepted. And then watching those petals rain down on them and Jonathan and Curran, and it was like an insane moment. And then the second was Curran and I never formally got engaged. We just kind of decided to get married in a sort of informal way. But when we were shooting the engagement scene, he took the prop ring and put it on my finger, and I started weeping because I was
Wow.
flooded with just joy. I showed it to random people. I showed it to a grip. I was just like, look at this ring. Yeah, Roshan is very efficient director. We worked less than 10-hour days on this whole movie. Like he's really good with getting the day done. It was the one time we were a little bit behind because he was running around the set showing off this very generic prop ring to everyone who would see it.
That that is that is such a cool production fact, and that is so sweet. Karan, I was wondering, so you and Jonathan, the dynamic you two have is fantastic. How did you two build that chemistry?
Yeah, we didn't like most movies, we had no time. So we met a year before we actually made the movie. Me, Roshan, and Jonathan actually went to dinner in New York and we had a really nice dinner. And Jonathan actually was just about to go do a Broadway show with a mutual friend of mine. So we were just talking about that a lot. And then over the year, we didn't really connect again until we made the movie. And then Jonathan was filming something else. So he arrived on our set with no preparation, no rehearsal, and we just started shooting. He landed from England where he was doing Doctor Who at night. And then at 6 a.m., we were shooting the Meet the Parents scene right away, right into it. And so I think he's such a good actor that it was just a mix of like, we're just going to trust that this is going to happen. But I don't know if this was planned by everyone or not. But the first scene we shot with him was when I'm bringing him to meet the family. And I had already shot a bunch of scenes
scenes with the family. So it kind of felt like he was the new person in the room with a group of people who had already worked together, and he was kind of like the outsider in it. So in a weird way, it all kind of just worked itself out. And by the end of that day, I think we had all bonded enough. But yeah.
Yeah, and that makes sense because it is such an awkward kind
Yeah.
of scene. Like and so I think that him maybe flying in kind of adds to that. That's so funny. And sort of going back into that relationship, but like Roshan, there's this moment where the film goes from being like sort of standard in terms of its like shooting and stuff, and then when the two finally embrace each other, Naveen and Jay, it is this like incredibly, it goes into this very stylistic, it's
Mhm.
beautiful. What was it like to shoot that? How did you do that?
Yeah, the idea was to for the movie visually to move between something that feels prosaic and ordinary and mundane, and then to have increasingly little flashes of a Bollywood aesthetic, which is to say over the top and a little turgid. Would be the worst word for it, I guess. But we that kiss is supposed to symbolize the first transition into it, like you already pointed out, and figuring out how to rotate the camera to match cut between them kissing in the gallery and then in the bed was really tricky. It was not straightforward, and I am a scientist, but had a lot of trouble understanding the angles and the math. But Amy Vincent and Todd Ellison, the camera operator, both figured it out. Amy Vincent was a cinematographer, and then I had always had this idea of shooting through shears because it's very common in Bollywood to shoot through curtains, and I also liked the idea that the light behind those curtains would cast almost tattoos on the actors' skin because again, it just feels very Bollywood. So that was the way we practically did that. But that shear is essentially taped in front of the camera, and then someone is moving it as if it was being ruffled by the wind, and then a separate light behind a separate shear is projecting all of those patterns, which aren't actually coming from the shear that you see. So it was like a complex but kind of simple thing that was meant to look very Bollywood.
Yeah, the magic of the movies. That's crazy. I literally gasped when I saw that cut. I was like, it was kind of like the movie goes from being good to like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'll wrap up with this final question. So specifically, Karan and Roshan, you two are, not just collaborative partners, but, in real life, there's a little something
Yeah.
going on between you two. So I was wondering, what was it like you guys to work on this set together? How did you two bring out like the creativity in each other? And what were the, you know, most exciting parts of working together like this?
I think it's like a rare thing to be able to see your partner doing their work. It's an access to this whole other part of their life. And in the case of artistic work, it's a way of deepening the intimacy. So to see Karan act, especially in this role, is always like the most thrilling thing for me. And in some ways, the reason I love directing is just the opportunity to direct him because he improvises so much. He makes up things, and it feels like he's making me laugh, and that's the only reason we're all there. Um, so yeah, it's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, and this project, I think more than anything, it was the most personal thing I think either of us has ever done. So we felt constantly so lucky to be like, if we were just making this individually, it'd be so special. But the fact that we're getting to share this experience, this is a movie that we wish we had when we were growing up and coming into ourselves. And so we were getting to make that movie, but together. So that felt like kind of almost too good to be true in many ways. And then the real practical thing of like being in Hollywood, we're always kind of going from job to job. You don't know what your schedule is. So in a weird way, when you're away from home, we shot in Vancouver, to be able to make it together and be away from home, but together and not have to worry about distance and all that stuff is also really, really nice. And so in many ways, it felt like a dream job.